I didn't think hearing the words would actually hurt. Not like this. "So, I asked her," he said, grinning. I stared at the beer bottle in my hand like it had answers. "Asked her what?" I played dumb. Stupid, really. I knew exactly what he meant. "To marry me," Liam said. She said yes. And just like that, it felt like something cracked inside me. I'd seen it coming. The dinner reservations, the long weekends to wine country, the way he talked about her more and more like she was home. But part of me, some messed up, hopeful part, kept thinking it wouldn't happen, that maybe he'd get cold feet, that maybe he'd realize he didn't actually want to marry her, that maybe he'd realize he wanted something else. Or someone else. But no, he looked so damn happy, sitting on my couch like he belonged there. His sneakers kicked off, socked feet up on the coffee table, his shirt slightly wrinkled from the day. Same Liam I've known since high school. The Liam who used to sneak me out of my house when things got bad at home. The Liam who sat next to me in health class and made jokes under his breath until I couldn't stop laughing. The Liam I've been in love with since I was 18. And now he was marrying a woman. Damn! I finally managed, keeping my tone light. "That's wild, man. Congrats." He smiled like a kid who just got picked first in gym class. "Thanks. I'm nervous as hell. But I think she's it, you know?" I took a long sip of beer to buy time, nodded. "Yeah. That's great. I'm happy for you." Another lie. Add it to the pile. He leaned back, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was nervous. "I know it's fast. We haven't even been together 2 years. But when you know, you know." I hated that phrase. Mostly because I thought I knew too. I thought I knew him better than anyone. I thought if he ever felt even a flicker of what I felt, he'd say something. I thought he'd tell me. But I guess he did. Just not in the way I wanted. "You gonna be my best man?" he asked, grinning at me again. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I felt like I was floating just above my body, watching this whole thing from a few feet away. Like my brain had stepped out to smoke a cigarette and left me alone in the wreckage. "Of course," I said. Because what else could I say? He raised his beer, and I clinked mine against his. "To love," he said. "To love," I echoed, swallowing the lump in my throat. And I told myself this wasn't the end, even though it felt exactly like it. A week later, I was standing in a men's boutique in downtown LA, staring at racks of tuxedos while Liam flipped through fabrics like he actually knew what he was doing. "This is kind of fun, right?" he asked, holding up a navy jacket with black lapels. "Classic, but not boring." I nodded, but my stomach was twisted in knots. I hadn't even wanted to come. He'd texted me the night before, "Need my best man's opinion tomorrow. Be ready at 11. I'm buying lunch after." It wasn't the tuxes I had a problem with. It was the fact that he kept saying things like, "my best man," like it was supposed to mean something. Like it wasn't just another stab in the ribs every time he reminded me that I was going to be standing next to him on the most important day of his life, and it wouldn't be me he was saying vows to. "I still think you should go with charcoal," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Black's a little too prom, and navy's trying too hard." Liam laughed, tossing the jacket back on the rack. "Jesus, you're worse than the stylist. No wonder I trust your opinion." The compliment hit like a stone. I gave him a tight smile and shoved my hands in my pockets. The woman working the store walked over, eyeing us both. "Let me guess, groom and best man?" she said, clearly fishing for a reaction. Liam grinned, completely unfazed. "Yeah, you can probably tell which is which," she chuckled. "You two have great chemistry." I felt something in me flinch. Liam didn't even blink. "Yeah, he's my guy. Has been since high school." And there it was. My guy. That was the thing about Liam. He always said stuff like that. Stuff that sounded like, maybe it meant more. And it never did. We left the store an hour later with nothing purchased. Just a few photos on Liam's phone and a plan to come back once he made up his mind. I figured he'd pick something safe. He always did. Except apparently when it came to who he was marrying. In-N-Out was his lunch pick. Something about needing, quote, "after all that overpriced tailoring." We sat in the car with the windows down, fries between us, him humming to the radio while I tried to figure out how to breathe without my chest caving in. "She's got this idea for the wedding," he said suddenly, licking ketchup off his finger like it was nothing. "She wants us to write our own vows." I turned to look at him. "You serious?" He nodded. "Says it's more personal that way." "Honestly, I'm kind of into it." I stared at him for a second too long. "And what are you gonna say?" Liam shrugged, a little shy for once. "I don't know. That she makes me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That when she's around, everything else fades out." I looked away fast, out the window, toward the sunlit parking lot, the families with kids, the girl in the next car over laughing into her phone. "You ever feel that with anyone else?" I asked, not sure why I said it. There was a pause, one of those long, drawn-out silences that meant something. I didn't dare look at him. "Yeah," he said quietly. That word hit like a sucker punch. I turned back, heart pounding. Liam was still chewing on a fry, acting like he hadn't just torn open my ribcage. "High school," he added. "There was this girl, Melanie. I never told you. We crossed the line a couple times. She had this laugh that made you forget everything. Never went anywhere, though." I swallowed, hard. It was stupid. I don't know what I thought he'd say. That it was me? That he remembered that night in the back of my car junior year? When we got drunk and fell asleep tangled up and almost kissed? That he still thought about it? Like I did? Of course not. That would have meant it wasn't just me. We finished eating in silence. On the drive back, Liam told me about the venue, some vineyard outside San Diego with a cliffside view. He was excited, the kind of excited you don't fake. And I hated myself for not being able to match it. Later that night, I got home to my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't answer texts, just stared at the ceiling and listened to the low hum of traffic outside. Liam was getting married. That wasn't going to change. And I was going to stand beside him and pretend like I hadn't spent half my life in love with him. The week leading up to the bachelor party was unbearable. I didn't tell Liam I'd been losing sleep thinking about it. I didn't tell him I kept imagining walking down the aisle next to him, not as a best man, but as something else entirely, something impossible. Instead, I kept myself busy. Work, gym, pretending to have a life outside my apartment. But even at the grocery store, I'd catch myself imagining him next to me, brushing past my shoulder, laughing at a joke only I'd get. My chest would tighten, and I'd scold myself for being pathetic. Friday night, finally, it was the bachelor party. A rented cabin in the mountains, a small group of his closest friends. Beer, a fire pit, terrible karaoke. All of it felt like a gauntlet. Every time Liam laughed, his hand brushed against mine as we clinked bottles together. Every time he leaned over, it was just a little too close, just enough to make me forget that he wasn't mine. "Relax," he said at one point, nudging me with his elbow. "You look like you're about to pass out." "Just tired," I muttered, trying to sound casual. My voice cracked anyway. I'd lost count of how many times I had rehearsed this conversation in my head. But none of the rehearsals had prepared me for the smell of his cologne mixed with the pine from the cabin. It was intoxicating. Later that night, everyone had passed out except us. Liam and I sat by the fire pit, mugs of whiskey in hand. The glow painted his face in orange hues, his green eyes brighter than they ever seemed in the daytime. The quiet between us was comfortable at first, but then it started to weigh. "You've been quiet," he said softly. I almost laughed. Quiet? I hadn't stopped thinking about him in days, about how his fingers felt against mine that afternoon, about how his laugh echoed in my chest, about the night in high school when we almost crossed that line, about how it felt now, imagining him saying vows to someone else. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a grin. "Just tired." He didn't push. He didn't need to. Liam had a way of knowing when to back off. But his eyes were still searching, like he was trying to figure me out without words. Like he could see the storm inside me, even when I tried to hide it. I looked down at my whiskey, swirling the amber liquid. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" I blurted before I could stop myself. The silence after that was deafening. Liam didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me with a look I couldn't read. I mean, high school, college, all those stupid moments we never talked about, I added quickly. Sometimes I wonder. Finally, he sighed, shaking his head like he was trying to shake off a memory. I do, he admitted quietly. More than I should, but life moves on. My heart sank. Yeah, I muttered, but life didn't feel like it had moved on for me. Not really. Every memory, every laugh, every touch we'd shared, it all felt like it was happening right now, only I was the only one who'd noticed. We sat there for a while, neither of us speaking, just listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of trees in the wind. At some point, his hand brushed mine, lightly, not by accident. Not quite gentle, not quite bold, just enough to make my pulse spike. I didn't pull away. He didn't either. And in that moment, I felt the impossible. The wrong and the right all tangled together. I knew this wasn't a beginning. Not really. Not for us. But it was something. A spark. A reminder that despite the vows he would soon make to someone else, he had felt it too. Or maybe he still did. I wanted to tell him everything. That I loved him. That I'd been in love with him for years. That I would stand by him at his wedding and choke back tears because he wasn't mine. That I'd do anything just to make him pause. Just to make him reconsider. Just for a moment. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I swallowed hard and took a long drink of whiskey. And he did the same. Because some things, some feelings, are too dangerous to act on. Some truths are better left unsaid, at least for now. The wedding invitations arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. Thick cardstock, embossed gold letters, and Liam's name printed next to hers in a font so perfect it made my chest tighten. I held the envelope in my hands for a long time, turning it over, tracing the curves of his name with my fingertip. I didn't open it at first. Couldn't. Not yet. I set it down on my desk and stared at the blank wall, pretending I was working on something urgent while my brain replayed every moment we'd ever shared. The laughter, the late-night talks, the accidental touches that had always felt like sparks. Finally, I tore the envelope open. Inside, the crisp card smelled faintly of flowers, and I could feel my heart hammering as I read the words. The date, the time, the place, everything set, immovable. I sank into my chair, trying to convince myself that I was happy for him. I was, in a way. I wanted him to be happy. I always had. But the selfish part of me, the part that had carried this crush for over half a decade, ached like a wound that wouldn't heal. I called Liam later that night. "Hey," he said, his voice light and warm, completely oblivious to the turmoil churning inside me. "Hey," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Got your invitation." "Yeah, I came today." "Excited, right? I hope you can make it. It wouldn't be the same without you there." "Of course," I said. Liar. My chest tightened. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." "Good," he said, smiling over the phone. I could almost hear it, the grin in his tone. "You're gonna be my best man, remember?" "Yeah," I said, swallowing hard. "I know." We hung up shortly after, and I sat there, staring at my phone, trembling slightly. I wanted to text him back, to tell him everything, that I was in love with him, that I'd always been in love with him, that even standing beside him on the day he said "I do" would break me inside. But I didn't. I couldn't. The day of the bachelor party, I found myself driving up the winding mountain roads again. Liam had rented a small cabin overlooking a lake. The same place he'd taken me for our first real getaway during college. Only now, it felt different, charged. Every corner of the cabin seemed to whisper memories I wasn't ready to face. The party was in full swing when I arrived. His friends greeted me like nothing had changed, but I could feel Liam's gaze on me the moment I stepped inside. The way he looked at me, even from across the room, made my stomach twist and my hands shake slightly. There was that spark again, that undeniable pull. Later, after everyone had gone off to explore the lake or play cornhole, Liam and I ended up alone on the deck, a bottle of whiskey between us. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. "You know," he said, glancing at me, "it's weird. All these years, we've been through so much together. And now, this." "This?" I asked, heart hammering, trying to sound casual. "This," he said, gesturing vaguely at the lake, the cabin, the life ahead of him. "Everything. My wedding, my future, you being here." I swallowed hard. I wouldn't miss it," I said again, keeping my voice steady, though it was anything but. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought he might see everything. The longing, the love, the desperate hope I'd been hiding for years. But then he shook his head, a soft chuckle escaping him. "Relax, man. We've got whiskey, the lake, and a clear night. Let's just enjoy it, yeah?" I nodded, though my chest was heavy. We sat in silence for a while, drinking, watching the water, listening to the distant call of a loon. Every now and then, our knees brushed under the table. Our arms bumped when we reached for the bottle. Nothing overt, nothing that crossed the line. But it was enough. Just enough to make my pulse race and my mind spin. As the night deepened, Liam leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms above his head. His shirt rode up slightly, exposing a sliver of skin. I had to look away, pretending it wasn't a big deal. But it was. Every inch of him was a reminder of everything I could never have. And yet, he leaned a little closer. Not on purpose, I told myself. Just sitting, but my heart refused to believe that. The air between us was thick, charged, electric, dangerous, forbidden. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to close the distance. I wanted to tell him, to beg him, to make him feel what I felt. But I didn't. I couldn't. The moment passed, and we were just two best friends again, drinking whiskey on a deck, pretending nothing was shifting beneath the surface. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that moment, as fleeting as it was, had changed everything. The days leading up to the wedding felt surreal. Everything was moving so fast. Dress fittings, seating charts, rehearsal dinners. But I moved through it in a haze, feeling like I was watching my own life from behind a pane of glass. Every interaction with Liam was a delicate dance, normal on the surface, electric underneath. At rehearsal dinner, I watched him from across the room, smiling at his fiancée, leaning close when she whispered something in his ear. I forced a grin, told myself I was happy for him, but inside every laugh, every brush of his hand against hers felt like a knife twisting deeper. After dinner, I found myself on the balcony, nursing a beer, pretending to admire the city lights. I heard the soft click of footsteps behind me. Liam leaned on the railing, his silhouette outlined by the warm glow of string lights. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not at all." We stood in silence for a moment, the hum of conversation from inside drifting out to us. He was closer than I expected. Too close. My heart beat faster than I thought possible, and I fought the urge to step back. "You look tense," he said softly. I laughed nervously. "Yeah, well, you know. Best man duties. Lots of pressure." He smirked. That familiar mischievous glint in his eye. "You've been acting different all week." I swallowed. "Different how?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, our shoulders brushing. "I don't know. Distant, maybe. Like something's on your mind, something you're not telling me," I wanted to tell him. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to confess that I was in love with him, that I had been for years, that standing beside him on his wedding day was going to be the hardest thing I'd ever do. But I couldn't. Instead, I forced a laugh. "Nah, just tired. Lots going on." He studied me for a long moment, green eyes narrowing slightly, as if he could see through my lies. Then, finally, he leaned back, hands resting on the railing. "All right, if that's what you want to say." We stood there a little longer, the tension between us thick and unspoken. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant flowers from the garden. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the invisible gap, but I stayed still. The moment passed without a single touch, but the weight of it lingered. The next morning, we had the rehearsal. I walked beside him down the aisle, my heart in my throat. Every step, every glance at him was a reminder that this day was not about us, that it was about her. I tried to focus on my duties, straighten his tie, adjust his boutonniere, remind him to smile for the photographer. But every time he looked at me, even briefly, I felt a jolt. Later, during the rehearsal dinner speeches, I listened as his friends and family shared stories, all of them painting him as this perfect, happy, unflinching man. I smiled, clapped, laughed when appropriate. But inside, I was unraveling. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms, Liam found me sitting alone on the balcony again. He leaned against the railing beside me, silent for a long moment. Then he said, softly, almost a whisper, "You know, I don't think I've ever told anyone how much I value having you in my life." I looked at him, my chest tightening. "Yeah?" "Yeah," he said. "I mean, you've always been here, through everything. You get me better than anyone else. Even now with all this." He gestured vaguely toward the wedding preparations inside. My throat tightened. I know, man. I get you too." He shifted closer. Our knees brushed again. That spark, the one that had always been there, flared to life. My pulse raced, and for a moment, I thought I might be able to tell him everything. But the fear, the reality of what was about to happen, kept my lips sealed. Instead, I just nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, we stayed there a while longer, two best friends on the edge of something forbidden, the night pressing in around us. And though nothing happened, nothing crossed the line, the air between us hummed with all the things we weren't saying. I realized then that this wedding, this day, was going to test everything I'd kept hidden. Every stolen glance, every touch that lingered too long, every unspoken word, everything was about to collide, and I had no idea how I was going to survive it. The morning of the wedding arrived too quickly. I woke up to the sound of the city bustling outside my hotel room. The sun was already shining, casting harsh light through the curtains. I should have been excited, or at least happy for Liam. It was his big day. The day he'd been dreaming of, planning for, the day he'd found someone who made him feel whole. But instead, all I could feel was this crushing weight in my chest, this deep ache that wouldn't go away. I stood in front of the mirror, trying to adjust my tie, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The reflection staring back at me seemed foreign. The best man, the friend, the guy who was going to watch the love of his life marry someone else. I'd spent too many years pretending I didn't care, pretending it was enough to just be there for him. But today, it wasn't. Not when I knew, deep down, that nothing was ever going to change. Not when I realized that no matter how much I loved him, no matter how many moments we shared, it would never be me standing beside him at the altar. It would never be me saying, "I do." I heard a knock on the door and I jumped, quickly wiping away the stupid tears that had started to form. I opened the door to find Liam standing there, his face radiant, a slight nervousness in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked, noticing the tension in my face. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just, the usual pre-wedding jitters." He smiled back, but there was something in his expression, something that suggested he could see right through the lie. He stepped into the room, giving me a quick hug. "I'm glad you're here, man. I can't do this without you." I held him longer than I should have. I didn't want to let go. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest. But finally, he pulled away, and the moment passed. "All right, let's get you to the chapel," he said, giving me a playful shove. We drove to the venue in a quiet car, the tension thick between us. Liam kept glancing at me, his hand resting on his knee, his foot tapping nervously on the floor. I wondered if he knew something was off, but he didn't say anything. Maybe he was just too focused on what was ahead. The chapel was beautiful. It sat on a hill, surrounded by gardens, with white columns and a stunning view of the city in the distance. Inside, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Guests were arriving, mingling, and I tried my best to act normal, to go through the motions. I checked the seating chart, made small talk with family members, and smiled through all the formalities, but all I could think about was him. I was standing by the altar, waiting for the ceremony to begin, when I felt his presence beside me. He was in his suit, looking every bit the picture-perfect groom, his dark hair perfectly styled, his eyes brighter than ever. "You good?" he asked, standing beside me. He clapped me on the back, a little too forcefully, like he was trying to distract me from whatever was going on in my head. "Yeah," I said, swallowing hard. "Just a little nervous." He laughed softly. "I get that. I couldn't have done any of this without you." My chest tightened. I looked at him, really looked at him, as if for the first time. "I'm happy for you, man," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, they felt like a betrayal. It wasn't true, not entirely. The ceremony began, and I stood there, watching Liam walk down the aisle. His bride, the woman he was about to marry, was stunning. She smiled as she walked, her dress flowing behind her. Liam's eyes locked on her, his face softening, as if he had found his other half. And I stood there, in the background, a witness to this perfect love that had nothing to do with me. I felt like I was suffocating. The vows were beautiful. They exchanged words that made everyone smile, the family in the front rows dabbing at their eyes with tissues. But I couldn't hear a word. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, and all I could see was Liam, standing there, so certain, so happy, and I was just a shadow in the background, a fleeting presence he had no idea was slowly falling apart. When it was my turn to hand him the ring, I froze. His hand brushed mine as I placed the band in his palm, and for a split second, the whole room seemed to disappear. I looked at him, and for a moment it felt like everything was standing still, like he was mine, like he could look at me the way I'd always wanted. But the moment passed, and the world came rushing back. "Do you, Liam, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the officiant asked. Liam smiled. "I do." And just like that, my heart shattered. The reception was in full swing. Lights twinkled like stars, music thrummed through the hall, and everyone was laughing, celebrating. I sat at the head table, Liam beside me, his hand resting briefly on mine before quickly retreating to clasp hers. Every time he smiled at her, my chest tightened, like a fist had been pressed against my ribs. I tried to focus on the small details, the way the flowers were arranged, the subtle elegance of the table settings, the laughter of our mutual friends, but it was impossible. Every glance, every word, every laugh from Liam ricocheted inside me like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. After dinner, as people crowded the dance floor, Liam leaned over to whisper something in my ear. "You okay?" I nodded, barely. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." He gave me that knowing look, the one that made it feel like he could see straight into my soul, and for a split second, I thought he might. Thought he might know everything I'd kept hidden all these years. But then the music swelled, and the moment was gone. Later, as the night wound down, the newlyweds slipped away for a private moment outside. The rest of us followed slowly, leaving the hall behind. The moon hung low over the garden, casting a pale glow across the stone path. I found myself walking beside Liam again, closer than anyone else. "It's beautiful," I said softly. He looked at me, his eyes catching the moonlight. "Yeah," he said, quiet. "It really is." We walked in silence, side by side. Then, without thinking, I reached for his hand. It was instinct, memory, longing, all rolled into one desperate need. His hand lingered in mine for just a moment before he gently pulled away, brushing his fingers against mine in a fleeting, almost teasing gesture. I stopped, my heart hammering. "Liam." He turned to me, his face serious now, the playful spark gone. "I know," he whispered. "I feel it too." I wanted to throw myself at him, to tell him everything, to stop pretending. But the reality was harsh and cruel. He was marrying her. There was no turning back. My chest ached with every breath, every beat of my heart. I can't, I choked out. I can't do this. Not like this. He nodded, his eyes glistening in the moonlight. I know, he said softly. Me neither. But we can't. Not now. Not like this. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I swallowed hard, gripping my jaw to keep my voice steady. I've loved you for so long, Liam. And now... I know, he interrupted gently. I've loved you too. Always have. But she's part of this life I've chosen. And I can't undo it. We stood there for a long moment, fingers nearly touching, the world around us silent except for our own ragged breathing. The impossible tension hung between us, a line we knew we couldn't cross. I'll be there, I said finally, my voice breaking. I'll be your best man. I'll smile. I'll toast. I'll do everything. But no, it's killing me. He gave me a small, sad smile, the kind that makes your chest hurt. I know, and I'm grateful. You mean more to me than anyone. Always have. We stood there a little longer, two hearts caught between love and duty, between desire and reality. And when we returned to the reception, our hands no longer brushed, our shoulders no longer leaned close, but the spark, the unspoken truth, lingered in the spaces between us. The wedding went on. The vows were said. Champagne was poured. Everyone celebrated. And I stood beside Liam, smiling, laughing, holding back the tide of everything I felt. Because some loves are too powerful to act on, too dangerous to risk, and some hearts are destined to break, even while beating right next to the person they were meant for. But deep down, I knew one thing. That night on the balcony, that whisper of our truth in the moonlight, it would never leave me. And neither would he.